Good day, YouTube. I'm Daniel Claremont. I'm the Acadian therapist. Welcome back to lovely rural Nova Scotia. I hope that you're doing well. When it comes to major life changes, often we approach them from a light switch kind of model, which usually sounds some version of, I was doing a stupid thing, and then I realized I did a stupid thing, I smartened up and I stopped doing it, and I never did it again. And that's such an appealing story, isn't it? I think people like that story because it speaks to willpower, it speaks to taking charge, taking control of something. There's something permanent about it. And to be fair, there are some behaviors that do work that way. In my experience, usually when there's an existential threat, so you have a life-threatening crisis, maybe you have a heart attack or a car accident or, some other health scare. Someone threatens to leave you if you don't change your behavior in a relationship. And so you do some intensive work and you seem to be able to keep that change going. And that's wonderful when it works out. However, most reasons why people come to therapists anyway, they've already tried the light switch method, and it sort of leads to this sort of up and down, relapse, recovery, relapse, recovery. It almost looks like a wave. In fact, a few weeks back, I talked about this concept of the motivation wave, how there's a phase where you're just getting started, you start to feel really proud of yourself, and then you reach a decision point of either maintenance or relapse. Last week, we talked about maintenance, being able to maintain that healthy life change and different things you can do to help that happen. However, this week, we're going to talk about the more challenging aspect. What if you are relapsing? What if you have already relapsed? In fact, as I'm recording this video, it's the end of 2022, so it's during the holiday period. I don't know about you, but I'm not feeling as motivated, as energetic. I'm feeling more tired and whatnot. And I'm probably relapsing into some unhealthy habits that I'm going to have to address in the new year. This is why New Year's resolutions become very popular. But I wanted to take a moment to talk about this phase here. Before we get started on another project with New Year's, let's check in about where we're at on the motivation curve. It's right here, actually. If you take a look, I'd say we're right around here, where there's less energy, there's less motivation, there's more shame that might be showing up. What can we do in this phase to help the wave rise again? That's what we're going to talk about. As always, if you see value in this content, please feel free to like, share, comment, subscribe. All these things help support my work here. We have a lot to cover. Let's get to it. Let's start by talking about the symptoms of this phase. So I've already mentioned a few of them, but you might be feeling more tired, lack of motivation, lack of energy. You might be experiencing forgetfulness. It honestly slips your mind to drink that glass of water every morning, or maybe you've forgotten the gym exists at this point. Maybe you're noticing some irritability. Maybe you're having more arguments with your loved ones. I find an interesting aspect of this time of year is it can lead to more fairy tale telling. We tell ourselves little lies like, it doesn't have calories when I'm on vacation, or I can have that extra portion, it doesn't matter. I think that it is very helpful to be honest with yourself. So the truth is, you probably do deserve a break. You do deserve comfort. You do deserve rest. And also, if whatever behavior you're looking to do, it wasn't healthy for you before, it's still not healthy for you now. It's not more unhealthy, it's just as unhealthy. So be honest with yourself about the decisions you're going to make. That's going to help you with a harm reduction approach that I've talked about before. We're going to talk about it again here. A way of doing the unhealthy thing in a little bit of a healthier way. Another common symptom of this phase is shame and guilt. We beat ourselves up so readily, like, how could I have fallen back into this trap? Why can't I just find the energy? Why can't I just find the motivation? Well, as I talked about in the Motivation Wave episode, there's a lot of rhythms that we live our lives to that are completely natural. They're out of our control. It's not a matter of lack of willpower or determination or some self-destructive urge necessarily. It could just be that it's the time of year. There's less daylight. You're more tired because of that, or you're craving more carbs because we're moving into winter. Perhaps there's some evolutionary connection there. Perhaps we're just getting roped into the stories of other people around us because everybody at the office or everybody in school is looking forward to that Christmas break and you're feeling exhausted because you need that break. Well, maybe you're buying into that narrative because everyone around you is buying into that narrative. Now, does this mean that we are helpless to these natural rhythms? Of course not. There's plenty that we can do to help compensate a bit for that. That's what we're going to move into next. So I'm going to move on to an appropriately East Coast metaphor, which is battening down the hatches. This is something that you might do on the ocean when a storm is coming. You'd batten down the hatches so that the boat doesn't get flooded. When a hurricane is bearing down on us, it's a good time to stock up on necessary supplies, charge up batteries, make sure that anything that's not fastened down outside isn't going to get whipped around and smash a window. And so when you're noticing that, let's say you're approaching a time of year that you have less energy than usual, there's more demands on your time, you're craving some of those high-calorie foods more, might be a good time to batten down your hatches or to think, what are some things you can take off your plate that maybe help you focus on the stuff that's more important. For example, maybe it's more important for you to spend time with your kids who might be struggling more at school at this time of year than it is to stay on top of your emails. So focusing, zeroing in on what is a priority, focusing on that. This might be the time for you to stop doing some of those healthy habits that are not as high priority as other things. So if you're going to let go of something that you've done, I like to think in terms of finding a deliverable, something that maybe you didn't achieve all your goals, but you achieved something. So the metaphor I like to use for this is I used to like going on road trips. I haven't done it in a little while. And something I would enjoy is, how far can I push myself to go? How far can I go before the next bathroom break? Do I have enough gas in my tank to make it to the next gas station? When you're tired, do you decide to rest here? Or do you try to push to that next city and that brings you a little closer to your goal? So you do this evaluation. What do I have in terms of resources? How far can I go? Where do I want to stop? And making a conscious choice. Instead of it falling apart because you couldn't do it any longer, it's making an intentional choice to say, you know what, this is far enough for today. This is far enough for this year even with this project. Practicing some pride and celebrating that accomplishment. Maybe you didn't, do the dishes today, but you did manage to send that text, that happy birthday text to your bestie. So finding the things that you are accomplishing, that you have celebrated, and letting go with maybe some gratitude for some of the other things that you didn't follow through on. You can be grateful to your past self for having that goal, even if you weren't able to go as far with it as you wanted to. Now, if you're in the process of relapsing into a bad habit, let's say smoking, I don't think many people would argue that that's a healthy habit these days. Well, maybe you can do the bad habit in a bit of a healthier way. Maybe you can smoke a little bit less. Or when you do smoke, tell yourself, I know this is a bad decision, I'm choosing to do it anyway. This brings an element of mindfulness to it. Now remember, we talked about the stages of change model before. So maybe in the past you relapsed and you pretended you weren't doing it, you were doing that fairy tale thing like, it's fine over the holidays for me to have a cigarette. So being intentional about it and saying, before you light the cigarette, you say, I know this is a mistake. This is a bad idea. This is not the healthiest thing for me, and I choose to do it anyway. If you recall in that stages of change model we talked about before, that is, you're bringing awareness to it. So you're not blindly doing it, which would be pre-contemplation. You're thinking about it differently. Another option to completely stopping doing the healthy thing, remember that even just doing it in a tiny habit, so that will add up over time. So let's say you started by flossing one tooth every morning. So that was one of Dr. B.J. Fogg's examples in his Tiny Habits model. Let's say if you wanted to learn how to floss one tooth every day. That's the tiny habit. That's all you have to do. Now, as you get used to it, maybe you're flossing your entire mouth every day, maybe twice a day. So you got over the hump, you're really proud of yourself because maybe when you had a lot of energy and motivation, you were able to do the whole mouth. Whatever your tiny habit is, if it's washing one dish, if it's walking 2 minutes, whatever. When you feel good, you raise the bar on yourself, but now you have less energy. So remember to drop the bar back down. Even if you do that tiny habit every day, it keeps the spark of that new healthy habit alive. And perhaps when you relapse, in the bottom part of that curve, you don't dip as low as you normally would. The tiny habits help keep it a little bit higher so that when you have more energy, perhaps in the spring, you're not as far gone. You don't have as far to recover, which leads into my next topic, which is starting the next wave and how things you can do at this stage will help that next stage along. So sometimes when I have low energy and I don't quite know what to do with myself, I clean something. I will get something organized. I'll declutter a little bit. I'll knock off a few boring things off my to-do list. I'll clean off a table. The reason being, even if I'm not super motivated now, if I clean, if I get things organized, if I make sure supplies are stocked up, well, when I am motivated, when I am energetic later, I don't have to do that decluttering stage. So it's helping to clear the stage for the next version of me, a little further down the road, who will have the energy to do stuff. Now, when I do have energy and I am motivated, I like to try to provide reminders for myself. I try to think ahead. So when I am energetic, what can I do to prepare for a future version of me that's going to need a reminder? I'll give you an example. So in the spring this year, I worked a lot on this model of Deep Space Nine. This was, I talked about it before, I think, and this was a pretty complicated model. There's a lot of fidgety little details, and it took a lot of time and effort. And so a few minutes every day I would paint this model, and I did it in the spring so that the Daniel in the fall, which is me, would have this concrete example in front of me of what the power of tiny habits could do. So it is quite literally a reminder that I can look at and touch, which impresses me. And it reminds me, even though I'm not as motivated, as energetic, all I need to do is do little things now. And it adds up over time, and I can surprise myself with what I can accomplish. Another reminder I planted for myself, quite literally, this fall, as the leaves were falling and the weather was getting colder and it was getting wetter and muddier, and I was feeling my energy starting to dip, I planted some daffodil bulbs. Now, I don't know, I'm not really a natural gardener, so I don't know if these bulbs will grow. But the plan is, after a long winter, in spring of 2023, these bulbs, hopefully, will start to sprout right around the time that my energy will start to boot up. And so these little splashes of color will provide me some courage and some inspiration to get started on some new projects, or even just to have hope that life is coming back after a long, dark winter. So think about your own life, your own self. What little reminders can you plant for yourself that will help you down the road when you might need that little boost? It's also quite possible that as this motivation wave, whatever project you've been focused on, is starting to drop, keep an eye out. Perhaps there's new motivation waves in a different way that are starting up. What have you been daydreaming about? What have you and your partner been talking about doing as a family? Check out your Amazon wish list. What's that course that you've been thinking about taking? Have you started noticing your clothes are fitting a little more snugly than you want them to? What motivations of a change are already starting, that you can help to encourage a little bit, start to develop some tiny habits to start that next wave, even as this wave is dropping. Because I find it helpful to remember that we are always a link in the chain. So we are a middle version of ourselves. And there are some parts of us that are beginning something new. There are some things that are ending, and we may or may not be aware of that. But what we do know is, for the most part, there's little things that we can do today that helps tomorrow's version of us. Help that person out a little bit. Help them a little further down that road of change that they want to accomplish. In fact, I wanted to share a personal story of how I applied a lot of these strategies for a very big behavior change of my own. So for about as long as I can recall, I have struggled with accepting my body or weight loss, and I've swung up and down in terms of weight gain. And so I started a few years back to take this a little more seriously. I thought, what if I applied the therapeutic interventions that I've studied, in school and as part of my work, to myself and my own past issues? And I started tracking stuff. I started tracking my weight, and as I tried different approaches. So take a look at this curve. So first off, this span here from 2019 to 2020, you can see that I bounced back pretty much to where I started. This approach was very willpower based. It was using different fad diets, and you can see perfectly matches that motivation wave. I bounced pretty much back to where I started. Now in 2020, I started applying the strategies that I discussed this season. So healing past traumas, re-examining my values, building tiny habits and routines. This time I dropped below my original target weight, which you can see with the horizontal line. And going into the fall of 2021, I started feeling my motivation to stay on track fading. There were past triggers related to the changing seasons. There was some work-related stress. There was a lot of stuff that was going on, and so I felt myself starting to slip. So, what did I do? Exactly what I've talked about here. I scaled back my expectations of myself. I focused on deliverables. What things was I proud of accomplishing? What relapsed comfort eating patterns was I willing to let myself do? And trying to be kind to myself. I stopped tracking my weight over some of the winter months because it was too stressful to look at it, and I let it go. And because I didn't battle myself so much, I didn't shame myself so much, I didn't relapse as far, and when I got back started again, and that was in spring of this year, it was much easier for me to reach my target weight. And so far, I've been able to maintain it a little bit more. Now, as I go back into winter, I expect to regain some weight, but as you can see, the wave is getting less, there's less extreme swings up and down. And also, when you take a look at the multi-year arc, there's an overall improvement, which has taken me, I'm going to say around 75 pounds lighter than where I started. But maybe the most valuable part is at this point, I don't care so much. And I think that's an important thing to remember. I talked a bit about it last week as well, about maintaining change. After a while, you need to let go of how important this goal was, because the more priority you put on it, the more stress you cause yourself. I now, after having applied these strategies, I have more faith in myself, that I can trust myself that if I slip, I'm not going to slip too far, and it's just about meeting different needs. And I will continue to practice tiny habits and healing past traumas and, developing new, healthier approaches and goals for my life, because we have to always keep going and evolving. So this episode is the season finale. This season has been the roadmap for change. And I just wanted to offer some food for thought. What if you haven't been telling a story of repeated failure that you somehow need to do better this time? What if your story is remembering again and again that you deserve a higher quality of life, that you deserve peace and happiness and healing, you deserve to trust yourself more, and also that you can learn and grow? And instead of repeated failings, what if you have repeated beginnings and new learnings and new growth? I certainly wish that for you, and that is certainly possible. What if instead of expecting yourself to smarten up, like just flick a light switch and manifest this change, what if you can embrace the fact that tiny habits that you do on a regular basis definitely will alter the course of your life, will take you on to a different road for the change that you want to have? I thank you so much for your attention this season, for your support. It's very much appreciated. I am sure that I will be back next year. I have no idea at this point what I'll be talking about, but it'll be interesting. I look forward to seeing you in the future. Take care. You have a wonderful holiday if you're having a holiday these days, and we'll see you in the future. Take care.